Blessings, peace and blessings to the family. Welcome back to the Angel Network 1930. I am your brother, your host, Afro Descendant Ali. Please like, share, and subscribe to the Angel Network. Support the Cash App at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I did want to bring you something from Sister Yvette Carnell's latest video titled Umar Johnson, Broken Records and Collective Attention. Not going as much into the Umar Johnson side, but wanted to go into a very poignant point that she brought up in her video with regards to political powerlessness and drilling down into it. While Sister Yvette may not agree with everything that would be represented on this channel, because it would fall within the scope of what is considered Pan-Africanism, which is a very broad term. I do agree with this sister on many points. I believe she is very politically astute, and I do believe that she is for the betterment of Black people, albeit the focus being in America, which I am not against. I am also for the betterment of Black people and original people globally. So a lot of her points are not lost on me because of the scope being exclusive to the United States. But she did say something very poignant with regards to political powerlessness that is applicable to Black people globally. So let's just dive right into it.
Before I get too deep into it, I want you to understand why that should be up for conversation. We are, and this was a good kind of synopsis, political powerlessness. We are a politically powerless group behaving as if we are a group of actual kings and queens. That's part of the reason I hate this Pan-Africanism, because it has really made people believe that y'all actually are kings and queens, as opposed to the people who have always had to fight our way up from nothing. If you see yourself as somebody who comes from people who doggedly fought year by year, generation by generation, then you behave differently. If you feel like you are a member of some kind of ridiculous aristocracy, monarchy, then you behave accordingly. You are confused. You are not a king. You are not a queen. I am not a queen. I'm somebody who comes from a generation of fighters, so I am a fighter. And so I pay attention to intel when it comes my way. You pay attention to intel when it comes your way. If you think you are a king or a queen, you like the court jesters when they come and they start dancing. You love that. Because you think you're king and queen, you just sit back. Oh, I like this. I enjoy this. Don't you enjoy it? I enjoy it too. I enjoy it.
Well, I do say that sister has said nothing wrong there as it relates to some aspects of Black people in general, although Pan-Africanism gets to stray here. It is what it is. We don't want to take away from the larger point, but I did want to leave this in here in that I'm not positioning myself in any way to be facetious as it relates to the system. But I do want to focus in on the political powerlessness aspect of it. And, there are Pan-Africans or people who would be considered Pan-African that are doing great political work internationally, albeit the scope, again, of what the sisters' work has done is within the United States. But we don't want to take anything away from that. But let's get into it here again.
So much. But if you understand that you come from fighters and you are politically powerless in a country that you built and your ancestors built, you behave very differently. You pay attention to outcomes very differently. That's what happens. And so what happens with a lot of people is that you are very confused and you think that you have time. You think that you have time to pay attention to Umar and debate his way. Maybe we should go his way. Meanwhile, everything that people have fought for, from the civil rights movement to the labor movement to all of that, everything that people have fought for, New Deal, all of that is going up in smoke. And on my timeline, it's way too many Negroes talking about Mr. Grit money. I don't want to hear let me just show you some of the what powerlessness kind of means.
So let's cue up this paper here. This is a paper by Nicholas Stephanopoulos. I'm not sure if he's related to George Stephanopoulos or if it's the same spelling as a Stepa or Stefa. But anyway, this is a paper which he examines how we understand and measure the power or lack thereof of different social groups within a democratic political system. So in this case, this is for Black people in America, as she's about to cue up in a little more context within the political powerlessness, and some other groups to include poor whites and LGBTQ, but this focuses mostly on Black people. Conceptual clarification of the paper. The paper challenges traditional ways of defining political powerlessness, which have relied on factors like numerical size, electoral participation, or financial resources, which definitely impact Black people in America. Instead, it proposes that a group is relatively powerless if its overall policy preferences are less likely to be enacted compared to those of other, and she will say this, other similarly sized and classified groups. All right, so let's continue on here.
My first goal, and this is from the article, my first goal in this article then is to offer a definition of political powerlessness that makes theoretical sense. The definition I recommend is as follows. A group is relatively powerless if its aggregate policy preferences are less likely to be enacted than those of similarly sized classified groups. I'm going to say it one more time. A group is relatively powerless if its aggregate policy preferences are less likely to be enacted than those of similarly sized and classified groups. Listen, we don't even have to go to similarly sized groups. Let me tell you what we can do. We can look at groups that are actually smaller than us and figure out that they have more power than us. We don't have to even go far enough to say, hey, let's find a similarly sized group. We can look at every group because every group is smaller. We can look at every group that is smaller and say they have more power. We're a politically powerless group. Let's look at some of the other kind of criterion takeaways. I just want you to pay attention to this while we over around talking about Umar and his grit money and his daughter. And you still, well, maybe he did. Child, he was unserious a long time ago. You got to be crazy to still be taking that man and thinking about and talking more than 5 seconds about what he say. That's a 2-second chuckle. Yeah, I know he was always messed up, and move on. First, the powerlessness factor stems from the third paragraph of Caroline's Products' famous fourth footnote.
So let's take a look at Caroline's Products, which is actually a famous court case, and how it applies in this context as it relates to Black people, particularly in America, as she's discussing. A concrete example, and we'll go into it, and the fourth footnote is actually from the case. And we'll get into some examples after this. Let her finish talking here.
Relevant part, this paragraph states that more searching judicial inquiry may be needed when the operation of those political processes ordinarily to be relied upon to protect minorities is curtailed. It states that heightened scrutiny may apply when a minority wields less power than it would if the political system were functioning properly. If this political system were functioning properly, we would have power.
So basically stating that in a system of democracy, you have groups that have political power and you have groups that are politically powerless. So in this case, you have a system where, let's just, for lack of a better term, because we're trying to break this down to a level that most people can understand, there are people in a system, you say, well, this is illegal, that is legal, and the law applies to everyone. It's kind of a all lives matter system. The most Americans will tell you that. Well, if you just do the right thing, then the right thing will benefit you, right? But we find that as Black people in America, the system doesn't always apply to us, or the laws don't always apply to us, and somehow they're interpreted in different ways as it relates to Black people. And another quote from the actual paper, I don't believe that she'll go into it here. In the paper, it says, I find that Blacks, women, and the poor are relatively powerless at both government levels, while whites, men, and the non-poor wield more influence. Right? So there's an actual quote, and here's another quote. There is a hole at the heart of equal protection law. According to long-established doctrine, one of the factors that determine whether a group is a suspect class is the group's political powerlessness. So again, here's a law judging, or here's a legal ruling judging that the law really ain't fair for everyone. It just depends on the political clout of that particular group. Right. And I think what the sister is going into here is that, our lack of focus has contributed to the political powerlessness of our people, which is not wrong. And I wholeheartedly agree with this, right? So if your focus is Umar Johnson, right? If your focus is Stephen A. Smith, if your focus is LeBron James, and not to disparage those people, but in the political context, they kind of don't belong. Right. So if that's your preference, if that's what you're consuming on a day-to-day basis, even more than 50% of your time, that is going to impact the bottom line of your political power. And in this case, it has resulted in our political powerlessness. Very accurate for our people. Let's let her continue on this.
I will go further to say, if it was functioning properly, we would have wealth. So the fact that we stay powerless for generations with just minor little hiccups lets you know that we are a powerless group. Powerless groups don't have time to discuss, spend a lot of time discussing LeBron James and his rich son. Those are rich people. We don't have the delusional man who makes videos in the park. We don't got time for that either. Okay. Second, the mechanism that typically is thought to protect minorities is in the word pluralism. If innumerable groups endlessly are forming and breaking alliances as they jockey for advantage, then each group sometimes will find itself in the majority. No group will be a perennial loser if the winning coalition is reshuffled on each issue. But who is always a loser? No matter how the thing is reshuffled, throw your hand up because you're in that group. And third, pluralism does not always work as intended. Sometimes a group is unable to cut deals with its counterpart, so it ends up being outvoted on item after item. It is precisely in this situation, when a group loses unexpectedly often, that group is relatively powerless. Ladies.
There you go. Again, very well articulated and very well broken down by Sister Yvette. So just to kind of give an example exactly as it relates to this particular thing, for just to, further try, and I hope I do it justice here and is understood. So several strategies could help Black people and communities gain greater political power as well. But just to put it more in context, one concrete example involves efforts to secure policies that address racial discrimination in areas such as housing or employment. Again, this is an example of political powerlessness and how the laws historically have not applied to Black people because of their relative political powerlessness in this case. So historically, many Black communities have strongly supported measures to combat discriminatory practices. So again, we have laws that govern housing, right? And those laws and employment, but they haven't always applied to Black people. Why? Because they have been interpreted, and they're like, people are basically interpreting these laws based on the fact that these people, Black people, have no political power. Historically, many Black communities have strongly supported measures to combat discriminatory practices and to improve access to quality services. However, when such policies have broad support within these communities, they have been stalled, watered down, or completely ignored by legislative bodies. So legislative bodies within a state, within a city, within a county, those are your councilmen, your councilwomen, your state reps, your state senators, whatever they call them in your particular jurisdiction, your aldermen. They're like, we ain't going to do nothing for you because you don't impact the bottom line. You have no power. You can just go in the corner and shout, but at the end of the day, you're just gonna go back and watch LeBron James and stupid little TikTok videos, and we don't have to respect anything you do. You are politically powerless. You have nothing. Right. So according to, and this is how it applies to the Caroline's products, which was that court ruling mentioned earlier within the context of this paper, according to the rationale from Caroline's products, when a minority group's political preferences, like those calling for robust anti-discrimination laws, are not translated into enacted policy due to systemic disadvantages, this failure signals that the group is politically powerless. In such a case, heightened judicial scrutiny would be warranted to protect the rights of Black citizens. So again, the law will basically pass the legislative body, the federal, the state, the county, the city. At the end of the day, the Black people are unaware that this law has discrimination written into it. So you have to wait until somebody is actually impacted and sues the particular body, whether it be federal, state, county, city, town, municipality, what have you, take it to court. Now you have to take it to court. That can be 10 years after the law, and thousands of Black people have been wrongly done by this. So you have to go back and do this kind of class action thing. Many people probably have died, suffered, been maimed as a result of this discriminatory law that was put into place. For example, how many discriminatory laws were put into place during the Jim Crow era? Hundreds and thousands of, not even, if not millions of Black people died, maimed, put out, kept poor as a result of this, generation after generation. And finally, in 1954, which was the 1955, the sounding alarm by the Brown versus Board of Education decision, brought about the initial shot of the changes that were brought to in America that resulted in the civil rights legislation of the 60s. But that in itself was not brought about as a result of Black people's political power. I would agree that the subsequent laws that were enacted in the mid-60s were actually brought into play because of Black people's protests and as a result of that. But that initial sounding bell of Brown versus Board of Education, as Brother Safiwe Baleka brought up, was only approved by the Supreme Court as a result of the fact that Emperor Haile Selassie was visiting the United States, and in order to erase the smell and the stench of oppression of Black people in America, and to prevent the unity of Black people with other Black people in America with Black people throughout the world, they hurried and sent the letter to the Supreme Court, and that link is in the community tab of this page here. I think I put it out yesterday. Yesterday being Sunday the 16th, I want to say. That was only brought about not because of Black people's pressure, but from some diplomatic intelligence standpoint that the United States didn't want to look too bad and prevent the unity. So if black people ever appeal to black people in America ever appeal to black people on the continent, the people from the continent will look at black people here and say, well, we saw that this Brown versus Board of Education ending school segregation was enacted. America ain't so bad, right? So that in itself was brought about as a result of that. But let's continue on here. Just to reiterate, again, the context to break this down a little further, and thank you. Shout out to Yvette Carnell, the whole ADOS movement, and Brother Antonio Moore. We have videos of Antonio Moore and Sister Yvette on the channel. According to the rationale from Caroline Product, when a minority group's political preferences like those calling for robust anti-discrimination laws are not translated enacted policy due to systemic disadvantages, this failure signals that the group is politically powerless. In such a case, heightened judicial scrutiny would be warranted to protect the rights of Black citizens. For example, if a state passed legislation that made it harder for Black residents to obtain affordable housing, despite overwhelming community demand for reform. Here, and again, the case again. Caroline's Products logic would suggest that courts should more rigorously review such legislation. Now, this is just a suggestion. It doesn't mandate it. So if the court doesn't want to, right, then the court probably won't. Now, if you have 1 billion Black people rioting in the streets and protesting in the streets, that might put pressure on them. Not saying Black people should be rioting in the streets, but just trying to give you context of why a lot of things happened in the wake of George Floyd protests. It appeared that Black people became more politically aware and were applying pressure. This is because the political process itself has not functioned effectively to secure the group's interest, and the judiciary must step in to uphold equal protection. So basically, this is saying in America, if you don't have political clout or if you have political powerlessness, the laws really don't apply to you, right? This is an acknowledgement of that. So even in itself, this is America saying we are not equal. You got to have political power for this law even to apply to you, which is against what the founding fathers try to build in the system anyway, because you can't start off wrong and end up right. You can't have these group of people who are 3/5 of a human being, and at the end of the day, write these ideal principles of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and you're denying people right under your feet, Black people, the pursuit of happiness, right? So, of course, 200 some odd years later, 250, I guess we almost said 250, about 2 years away from that, 248 years of so-called independence from the United States down the way, at some point the Constitution has to be thrown out, because when you wrote the Constitution, you had people under your thumb that it wasn't even applicable to, right? So here, I get a lot of people that say, so what's your solution, brother? Right? So several strategies that could help Black communities. I don't really like the term communities because what is the Black community anyway, right? Half the communities in America, Black communities in America, are gentrified, right? So you go to the little civic meeting and you got a bunch of different people, right, in a mostly Black neighborhood. So you can't even make laws specific for Black people in Black areas because there are really no Black communities anymore in America. Several strategies could help Black communities gain greater political power. While these solutions operate on multiple levels, from grassroots organizing to systemic institutional reforms, they all aim to ensure that Black policy preferences are translated into actual policy outcomes. So again, I'm going to reiterate. While these solutions operate on multiple levels from grassroots organizing to systemic institutional reforms, they all aim to ensure that Black policy preferences are translated into actual policy outcomes. So hopefully I'm representing Sister Yvette in this one. So if your priority on your timeline is Umar Johnson's parenthood, you might not be able to organize yourselves on a grassroots level. I hope I'm right, Sister Yvette. And if you want to implement systemic institutional reforms, your priority can't be gossip, Black entertainment gossip. Now, I don't want to get into the argument that this is all Black people do, right? Because it echoes to me in the all Black people buy Jordans, right? I don't think in my experience that Black people, this is all Black people do. But I think in America, we have been trained to only do that. Black people really want to do something. I don't think they know what to do, right? They're not being trained to what to do. So if you have and this, I'm not Democrat or Republican, but if you're Black Democratic candidates, this is Obama and Kamala. Salute to both. I mean, they're Black people. Okay, fine, whatever, right? But at the end of the day, if your best friend, if the wife of your best friend, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, is Beyonce, most Black people are like, well, maybe that's the right thing to do. If Cardi B, right, and Meg Thee Stallion is at your political rally, Black people say, well, maybe they're all right. Because Black people haven't really been shown the right thing to do. Like, Black people really want to do something right. They don't know how to start. They don't know where to begin. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that that's all Black people do out of choice, but we have had leaders that have guided us, have shepherded us in a direction to where we're not doing anything, right? So in this case, Black people want to do the right thing, but it's just that we haven't been shepherded in the right way. So it starts in many directions, and there were a lot of solutions here that I don't necessarily agree with, but in the most case, it's to become politically active. And I would say, if you become more politically astute from an economic standpoint via Antonio Moore, through a political standpoint, sociological, cultural standpoint through Yvette Carnell, more power to you. Right? Because we just need Black people that are doing something and more politically astute, more politically aware, right? Because we just can't continue at the same level where we have been. So one way to do so is economic strength, resource mobilization. Economic strength often underpins political power. Initiatives like community investment funds, cooperative businesses, or local entrepreneurship programs. Now, these are kind of band-aids for the entire thing, and here's where I do agree for the overwhelmingly most part with the ADOS movement. We need reparations, right? Because these things are just band-aids. We've had community investment fund. There goes that word, community, right? And then people, we may have to drill down this whole gentrification movement really on a socioeconomic level and say, did these people really move into Black communities to get into these community investment funds and these empowerment zones, right? Because almost like these community investment funds and empowerment funds always precede the fact that this community finna be torn down. Right? So when the projects go down and they build new developments, the Black people are, oh, they're about to do something good. It look nice now, but where are the Black faces that used to be here 30 years ago? Right? So, these things, with only community investment fund we need is reparations, right? And not these broad terms. And that's I get it. From an ADOS standpoint, it's like, look, hey, look, you will put these things in place as a community, and then all of a sudden, all these people from outside the community, they find their way. They have the ability to buy a whole house, right? Cash, money, and move into the community. And then they gain access because, look, I live in this zip code, right? I live in 21215 Park Heights, Baltimore, right? I live in 20002, right? Northeast DC, Trinidad area, right? You find all these white people that have moved into the area and they get access. Like, I'm poor, right? I live in these black neighborhoods, even though I bought this house for pennies on a dollar from Pop Pop and Nana, right? And refurbished it and bought it cash money with my grandfather's trust. But I live in the zip code too, so I'm entitled to these set aside funds for the zip code. It's a sneaky way, and that's probably something we need to look at under a microscope. But reparations is the only solution, and in most cases, I believe in it. And not in most cases, in every case, is specific to the people that have been damaged by that. And that is only a solution. And in the case of America, that applies to black people in America. In the place of England, that applies to its former colonies with England. In the case of France, that applies to the former colonies of France that are slaveholding, the former slaveholding colonies of the Netherlands, former slave colony holders in the Portugal. And in the case of Namibia and Tanzania, that's Tanganyika and Zanzibar, that's going to be for Germany, right? So salute to the sister for constantly trying to bring political awareness to our people. This is something that we have to refocus what we're doing, and we need more people who are teachers and guiding and shepherding our people in the right direction for the most part. So again, all love for ADOS and all love for Pan-Africans from me. But no shade to anything out there. If you're doing positive work and you're black people, I'm down with you. Salute to the family. Like, share, and subscribe. Support the Cash App at the bottom right-hand corner. This is your brother Afro Descendant Ali. Stay tuned. We have more coming to you. Peace and love, family.